after the girl no longer yearned for love. The father and husband from her previous life, who despised her like an enemy, in this life instead went mad trying every possible way to make amends. However, in the girl's heart, only the loyal dog she had raised with her own hands was the existence she regarded as family, cherishing it in the palm of her hand. Bayana Rosa Ariant, the living Yama feared in the mouths of the maids, who would fly into a rage over the slightest displeasure. The just-awakened Bayana had merely asked a maid what her name was, and scared the other party into trembling all over. What was strange was that, as the only legitimate daughter of the Marquis's household, the maid serving her was actually just the lowest-ranking errand girl. The woman immediately knelt down, kowtowed, and begged for her life, saying that the wet nurse had sent her, and as for the reason, she herself did not know. Bayana told her to go out first, go drink some water, and stop the hiccups. But the maid was completely unable to understand the young lady's sudden gentleness, until she let out a harsh threat. Get out immediately and call another maid over. Only then did the maid run out of the room, as if fleeing for her life. Hearing from other maids, the wet nurse had actually gone to look for the Marchioness in public today. The girl immediately got up and went out. If it were the former Bayana, she would at least have vented her anger on the maids first. In the past, the only person who had cared for her and looked after her was the wet nurse. So the original owner of the body could not tolerate the wet nurse placing the Marchioness above herself. But all of this, in her eyes, was nothing more than a childish farce. When she reached the corridor, the maids looked at her like mice seeing a cat. Since she already knew the miserable future, she should use a life of kindness to rewrite the ending. Ignoring the maids' attempts to stop her, she kicked open the Marchioness's bedroom door. Inside the door, 3 people were arguing endlessly, and when they saw her appear, the suppressed atmosphere instantly fell silent. So you're all here. The Marquis intended to leave first, but the Marchioness cursed angrily, screaming hysterically. The Marchioness's appearance at this moment was actually very similar to the world-weary, dying Bayana from her previous life. The only daughter of the great merchant Count Anning's family, she became the Marquis of Ariant's lawful wife at 18. As everyone knew, she had pursued the Marquis for several years, lavishly squandering huge sums of money just to exchange for a little love. But the Marquis was cold by nature, not to mention a single gentle word. He was extremely repulsed even by physical contact. She grew ever more desperate for her husband's love and racked her brains to give birth to a child. But what she bore was a daughter who could not inherit the title, utterly meaningless to her. So she pushed all the blame entirely onto her daughter. Bayana smiled faintly. So, what if she were a son? What could that change? The reason the Marquis did not care about this child was simply that he had no interest in the Marchioness. Presumably, even if one explained it to her, the Marchioness, driven mad to the extreme, would be incapable of understanding. The next second, she reached her demonic claws toward her daughter, shouting "die" non-stop. The wet nurse hurriedly blocked her, and was also implicated as a result. She charged toward Bayana without regard for anything else, and the girl simply sidestepped and easily avoided her. Escape first. She quickly shut the door, and the next second, an ear-splitting roar erupted from inside. She calmly ordered the knight to wedge his sword horizontally into the door handle. The door panel shook violently, and the sound of fingernails scratching the wooden door made one's scalp tingle. In her memory, the Marchioness had not gone mad to this extent. Was it because of trouble caused by the Marquis? She composed her expression, turned back with a smile, and said, "Everyone's worked hard." Then she turned and left like an outsider. Since the marriage, the Marchioness had not been able to step into her husband's residence even once, because the Marquis had issued a strict order forbidding it, even arranging guards at the office and the bedchamber. Then, how exactly was she born? Bayana's features were indeed identical to the Marchioness's, yet she did not resemble the Marquis at all. There was absolutely no blonde-haired gene in the family either. So was Bayana really the Marquis's biological daughter? Although the Marchioness should not have gone so far as to have an affair. This question should she go ask personally? As soon as this thought surfaced, she immediately put it into action. Whether she was the legitimate daughter or not did not matter at all. After all, she had already lived one failed life. So what was there to fear? The guard stopped her and asked her purpose, and the girl replied crisply, "I'm here to see father." Then, with a bang, she pushed the door open and went in. The butler was somewhat surprised. "Miss?" The Marquis did not speak, only maintaining a cold expression, with not a trace of human warmth on his face. Instead, it made her curious. Why exactly had the Marchioness fallen in love with such a man? She walked up to her father's desk and went straight to the point as soon as she spoke. "Am I really the Marchioness's biological daughter?" The Marquis's pen froze in midair. "What does this mean? Is this important to you? Take jokes like this elsewhere." Bayana remained unmoved and continued. "Although this really doesn't matter to me, climbing to the highest position is no easy matter." "You mean you want to be queen?" Everyone was so shocked their jaws nearly dropped. She really regretted not closing the door earlier. "If I want to become queen, is that possible? What nonsense are you thinking about. Bloodlines that are too pure can sometimes instead become a fatal weakness. After Bayana ascended to the position of queen, she was often threatened over her status because of her origins, with people using bloodline against her. The Marquis had never once brought these things up on his own, and this very attitude only caused the rumors to spread more fiercely, leaving the queen completely isolated in social circles. So now she needed even more to clarify this point first. I'm not stupid enough to jump into a fire pit while holding on to my own weakness. Am I the biological daughter of the Marquis of Ariant? The Marquis frowned deeply. This kind of question doesn't even deserve an answer. She fell silent for a moment, then the corner of her mouth curved upward. Because you never doubted it, never thought that I wasn't your daughter, so you felt there was no need to answer. So it turned out that what had been tormenting her all this time was nothing more than an illusion fabricated by her inferiority complex. If you want to keep spouting nonsense, then get out. Bayana smiled in satisfaction. Now she could be certain that she truly was this man's daughter. The Marquis was stunned for a moment, probably because her reaction was too inexplicable. So you're capable of showing an expression like this too. Do you want to be empress? Among the unmarried women of the empire, there is almost no one who doesn't fantasize about becoming empress. Back then, Bayana also believed that as long as she became empress, she would be happy forever, just like in fairy tales. She asked herself honestly, having already been an unhappy empress once in a previous life, did she really want to walk the same path again? Should she continue living according to the script dictated by fate? What was it that she truly longed for? The throne of the empress is not something one can sit on just because one wants to. That position is entangled with countless interests. In other words, this was not a fate she could avoid with a single "I refuse." Her father asked her calmly what she thought. Does my opinion really matter that much? Just as the Marquis was about to speak, a sudden loud noise came from outside the door, and both of them turned toward the source. They saw the butler rush into the room in a panic. I'm sorry, something has happened to the madam. At her mother's funeral, the direct relatives all arrived to attend the ceremony. People were curious as to why the Marquis's wife had died so suddenly, and even anticipated how someone so beautiful would be dressed, itching to see her corpse at once. Among these people, how many were truly saddened by her mother's death? At this moment, her father walked to her side and gently placed the yellow flower in his hand before the tombstone. The crowd buzzed with discussion. Burying her without opening the coffin was a violation of funeral rites and an insult to the Marquis's wife, denying the deceased blessings for the afterlife. So the rumors must be true. He really is a cold and heartless man. Every one of these harsh words reached her ears without omission. In her previous life, Bayana, unable to endure all this, flared up in rage and stormed out of the funeral. Even if she were to turn around and leave now, the outcome would probably not change. But now she could understand why the Marquis made such a choice. Because the Marquis's wife committed suicide, taking advantage of the servant's inattention and leaping from the window of her room. There are almost no funerals where the body is not publicly displayed, the only exceptions being when the deceased had contracted a vile disease, or when the body was so badly damaged as to be unbearable to see. The Marquis issued a gag order. The cause of his wife's death would not be made public. She made the same choice as her father, gently offering a yellow flower, expressing her final respect to the Marquis's wife, even if others would suspect or slander. Even if in her life, this mother had never truly played the role of a mother. At this moment, someone walked up to the tombstone, a tall figure standing quietly at the girl's side. Bayana turned her head to look and saw that it was her maternal grandfather, the Marquis's wife's father, the great merchant Count Anning. He trembled as he extended his hand, placed the flower before his daughter's tombstone, then caressed the cold stone surface with lingering reluctance. The sorrow of a white-haired person sending off a black-haired one. Witnessing such a scene firsthand made her chest feel as if it were tightly clenched, leaving her almost unable to breathe. Her grandfather stood up, but suddenly his legs gave way, and his body toppled backward. The girl hurriedly reached out to support him. Fortunately, another man got there first and caught him. As expected, that man appeared to be her grandfather's son. As he was leaving, the man turned back and shot her a cold glance. Why did it feel like he was glaring at her? Was it just her imagination? The girl was not to be outdone and glared back at him. She had thought he would say something, but he left without a single word, turning away and walking off. How embarrassing. She was actually sulking over such a trivial matter. Why was it that? That face always felt a bit familiar. The Marquis's wife's funeral lasted a full 3 days, and in the end, she was escorted by her direct relatives to the crematorium. Thinking about it this way, Bayana herself had once gone through a period of desperately craving love, even trying to pretend to be a very kind person. If she could be just a little more like the Marquis, would her father have cared about her a bit more? But even if she went to ask now, she probably wouldn't hear an answer anymore. With the madam gone, the Marquis's status and worth should now be rising sharply, and she herself was nothing more than a daughter unable to inherit the family. Until the moment he died, the Marquis never remarried. Perhaps the Marquis did not hate the madam as much as she had imagined. If only that were true. Perhaps she, too, had not been completely loathed by the one she loved so deeply. Her father handed the urn to her, then cut off a lock of his own hair. This was the final rite, placing the hair of direct blood relatives inside, symbolizing that marital bonds could continue even after death. It should originally have been done by her grandfather, but the blow of the first day had truly been too great. At this moment, a woman walked over. It seems I didn't arrive too late. Since I'm not a direct relative, I can't go in and can only wait outside. She was the wife of the great merchant Count Anning. In legal terms, she was Bayana's grandmother. This was also the first time the two of them had met at close range. Her grandmother handed over the lock of hair she had cut, and after placing it into her daughter's urn, the father and daughter did not exchange many words with her. Before leaving, her grandmother smiled and called out to her, "You should go see him. He must really want to see young Ae. Ever since the Marquis's wife went mad, he hasn't set foot in the imperial capital even once. Why would he want to see me?" Young Ae is his only blood relative. Not long after her mother died in her previous life, her grandfather, unable to withstand the blow, passed away as well, leaving behind a vast inheritance. But people suspected that the commoner-born wife had murdered the count for his wealth, and the nanny spent all day mocking and sneering at the countess. So the young Bayana gave testimony unfavorable to the countess, leading to the countess miscarrying during the interrogation. There was no doubt about it. That was her fault. She replied softly, "As things are now, I am no longer his only family." The woman was puzzled and felt insulted. His own flesh and blood consists of only young Ae. Bayana looked toward her abdomen. Isn't it the bloodline of the count's family? The madam's expression changed in fury. Did she not even know that she was already pregnant? Getting overly emotional is not good for the child in your belly. Whether you believe me or not is the madam's freedom, but if you don't want to lose her, take good care of yourself. In that case, it's better to inform the count, on the premise that it truly is the count's bloodline. The woman argued endlessly over this. "To think you'd even lose your temper at me over how I address you. How I address someone is my freedom, Countess." Family and outsiders, in truth, are not essentially different. Perhaps the former Bayana once longed for their affection, but having lived once as Li Jia, having truly felt parental love for the first time, she finally understood that sharing blood does not automatically make one family. Let this be the end of it. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. The woman refused to give up and chased after her to ask, "Does young Ae really not want to go see that person?" Yet she received no response at all. After returning to the Marquis's residence, the wet nurse's eyes were red with grief for the young lady. But her mother's death brought almost no change to Bayana. When the Marchioness was alive, she ate well and slept soundly all the same. She listened to the wet nurse's consoling words with some impatience, as waves of drowsiness swept over her. Just as she was about to fall asleep, her grandmother burst in noisily, insisting that she must see Bayana one more time. The wet nurse tried again and again to stop her, but left with no choice, Bayana had to appear in person. She first told the wet nurse to go and rest. "We meet again, Countess. Please come in." The wet nurse was still trying to dissuade her at the side, when the girl asked coldly in return, "Do you know who you are speaking to?" At least for the next half year. If she wanted to secure the future position of Empress, her pride had to be strong enough to suppress the other party. But for the wet nurse, this was the first time she had ever seen her like this. The wet nurse was utterly heartbroken. "If you cannot keep quiet, then please leave. You too." Escort the wet nurse out. "That's enough. Don't just stand there. Please sit down, Countess." The two sat facing each other. "Didn't you have something you wanted to say?" "Young Ae, you're a little different from what I heard. Is that young Ae's wet nurse? If I were to arrest her on charges of insulting a noble and interrogate her, what would young Ae plan to do?" The girl set down her teacup. "Beating around the bush isn't your style. What do you really want? Please go see him once." The girl hadn't expected her to be so stubborn, and could only agree reluctantly. The two pushed the door open and entered. "You've come. Come a little closer." Just looking at grandfather's state is enough to confirm that the Countess did not kill him. Besides, there was no need. There was already no longing for life left in the Count's eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked in return. And what reason would she have not to be? She and the Marchioness had never been as close as others claimed. The former Bayana had once held expectations toward this grandmother. Now all that remained was a trace of sympathy from one woman to another. They had both once been far too blind in love. And now, could they avoid repeating the same mistake? Or would seeing him just once more cause the madness of the past to replay? At that moment, her grandfather suddenly embraced her. "I'm sorry for always avoiding your pain. I shouldn't have done that. It was all my fault. So don't cry." What was he saying? She wasn't crying at all. "Don't cry so bitterly that you can't even make a sound, my child." Not long after her mother's death, Bayana received an invitation from the Imperial Palace. The wet nurse picked out a sky blue dress for the young lady, which she only glanced at once, before throwing it to the ground without hesitation. Sky blue was once her favorite color, and now the color she despised the most. Influenced by the original body, she was already finding it hard to fully control her emotions. Before even seeing him, Her heart was already in chaos, and she truly dared not imagine what she would become when facing him again. Would Bayana fall in love with him once more? Would she, like at the beginning, be lost at first sight? She changed into an elegant green gown. In her previous life, she had once been confident, believing herself to be the most beautiful woman in the world, until she met that person, the one already hailed as the Empire's #1 beauty. That bright, clear sky blue long hair became the greatest treasure of the entire empire. The emperor sent an invitation to the marquis, ostensibly to comfort the young lady who had lost her mother. But the true intention was something everyone understood. The emperor had countless consorts in his harem. The number of his offspring alone exceeded tens of thousands, among them 6 princes. The only 2 most likely to inherit the throne were the eldest prince born of the imperial consort and the 6th prince born of the late empress. Although the 6th prince was named crown prince at birth, the eldest prince was 16 years older than the crown prince and had the full support of the aristocratic faction. The crown prince, at a disadvantage in every respect, nevertheless had the absolute support of the emperor himself. And the first target the emperor sought to win over was the Arient Marquis, which had always remained neutral. Bayana was afraid that after seeing that man again, she would not even recognize herself. Could she bear the almost crazed love Bayana had once felt for him? At that moment, her father suddenly spoke. "I didn't expect you to take the initiative to speak to me. From the moment she became crown princess in her previous life until she ascended the throne as empress, the marquis had never truly concerned himself with her life. Why are you suddenly asking about my thoughts? You never did before." Her father only replied indifferently, "This is your life." "Then what if I don't want to?" "You mean you don't want to become empress? Is that not allowed?" He had probably long since designated her as the future crown princess. As far as the current crown prince was concerned, there was no more suitable candidate than her. In the end, Bayana would still become crown princess. "If I say I'm not interested in the position of empress, can all of this stop?" The marquis only indicated that this would be very difficult. She sneered inwardly. "I knew it. Then why did you even ask?" The carriage slowly drove into the imperial palace. The marquis extended his hand to his daughter and said in a low voice, "Although it's difficult, it's not impossible." Bayana lifted her gaze in surprise. "Does that mean you will respect my wishes? I really don't understand what you think about every day." The 2 walked into the reception hall and bowed in greeting to the son of the empire. The emperor was greatly pleased. Worthy of being the marquis's daughter, she really does look so much like him. His smile was even gentler than she remembered, which surprised her a little. Back then, Bayana didn't even know how to give a proper greeting, only offering a shallow, polite smile. "Come over here." She glanced at the marquis, and only after receiving her father's nod did she slowly walk up to the emperor. "How old are you this year?" "Almost 11. Hearing this, His Majesty smiled even more broadly. "That's just the right age." It was clearly a test, yet Bayana faintly felt that His Majesty seemed to favor her more than in her previous life. At that moment, the captain of the guards announced, "His Imperial Highness the Crown Prince requests an audience." A ridiculous question surfaced in her mind. Would she fall in love with him again, to the point of self-destruction? Or could she remain as calm as she was now, whether in her past life or this one? That face was perfect to the point of cruelty. Bayana Rosa Arient pays her respects to the Empire's little son. The Crown Prince gave a slight nod, and the Emperor had him step forward as well. When the 2 stood together, His Majesty said with even greater enthusiasm, "What a well-matched pair of children. Isn't that right, Marquis? Chief Attendant, what do you think?" Like a pair of birds flying wing to wing. Bayana's mind was full of question marks. So they had already been this blatantly obvious about their intentions back then? And yet she herself had foolishly stared straight at the Crown Prince. The chief attendant stepped forward to remind them that the audience time was up, but the emperor still seemed reluctant to let them go just yet. "The flowers in the back garden of Bissard Palace are in full bloom. How about letting the young lady go have a look?" The 2 of them had clearly planned this in advance. "Before the marquis finishes handling official business, you will accompany the young lady and take a good stroll for me." The Crown Prince extended his hand toward her. "My lady." The moment Bayana took his hand, she couldn't stop it from trembling. Whether in her past life or now, the plot unfolded exactly the same. If there was any difference, back then the trembling was from a fluttering heart. But now, it was fear of the self that was about to be changed. The sky was clear, the sunlight almost blinding, as if even the gods were playing a joke on her. A strong gust of wind suddenly swept through, white petals swirling through the air, intertwining with his silver-white hair, beautiful beyond reality. Just like that moment, Bayana instantly fell into the abyss of unrequited love. Sirius Ethanlopriston, the Empire's crown prince, the future emperor, the person she would never forget, no matter how many times she died. He was the man Bayana had once been willing to love with her very life. Thinking back on it, he hadn't disliked her from the beginning. The crown prince, raised from childhood in imperial education, knew better than anyone how to treat others with proper courtesy. Yet she mistook that courtesy for love. Someone who has never truly felt love cannot distinguish the boundary between politeness and affection. Later, she finally understood. Only when she saw with her own eyes the deep affection the crown prince showed to his lover. That kind of tenderness had never been given to anyone else. If at that moment she could have chosen to let go, perhaps the ending would have been completely different. But Bayana was unwilling to admit this, and she vented all her resentment onto the woman he loved. Perhaps from that point on, Sirius truly began to feel disgust toward her. Yet the stubborn Bayana always believed that all of this was that woman's fault. Even before meeting her, the crown prince had always looked at her with a disdainful gaze. The wet nurse ran over joyfully to tell the young lady that the palace had sent flowers again. It seems His Highness the Crown Prince is very fond of you. Bayana felt a wave of headache coming on. This gift was far from simple. Risha flowers are the symbolic flower of the crown princess. The crown prince himself would never send such a thing. He probably didn't even know the meaning behind it. These flowers were the emperor's warning to the nobles, because she simultaneously held the inheritance rights of the Ariant Marquisate and her maternal grandfather's countship. To any noble, she was a dream marriage candidate. If a woman could not continue the family bloodline, then her husband would inherit everything. However, the Marquis's household should have long since designated an heir. Logically speaking, that person should be appearing around now. She really should have investigated who that guy was earlier. In her previous life, she had been single-mindedly obsessed with the crown prince. Fortunately, this meeting with the crown prince was far calmer than she had imagined. And whenever her heart started racing too fast, she had Li Ji-Os rationality to step on the brakes. But once she had nothing to do, her thoughts inevitably drifted back to the crown prince. So she decided to go out to clear her head. When she arrived at the garden, it was overgrown with weeds, clearly abandoned for a long time, and she thought to herself that no wild beasts would probably pop out, right? Just then, the bushes behind her suddenly rustled. The girl turned around nervously. Could it be that there were bears here? After all, this was a Marquis estate. At most, it would be small animals like cats or rabbits. I'll go check it out. She carefully parted the thorny vines, only to see a clump of blue hair stuck inside. Is it a trapped kitten? Should I help it? She had never been able to resist animals, so she ignored the scratches from the thorns and reached out to pull the kitten free. But the next second, she lost her balance and plopped down on the ground. After seeing clearly what the little thing in her arms looked like, the girl's eyes suddenly widened. It wasn't a kitten, it was a boy. Bayana stared at him for quite a while. The boy was so nervous that he didn't dare move at all. She stared straight at him like that, then suddenly reached out and began brazenly kneading that soft little face. Oh my. The texture is surprisingly bouncy. Voices of servants came from the distance. Where on earth did that kid run off to? When they saw the young lady's figure, they hurried over, and Bayana stood up and asked back, "What's going on?"
Don't make me ask a second time.
Now that the Marchioness has passed away, the master of this estate is me, and this garden naturally falls under my authority as well. You barged into my territory without permission, and you still won't answer? Are you planning to ignore me? The maids immediately knelt down to admit their fault and beg for forgiveness. In fact, even without asking, she could guess there was a high chance they were here to look for this child. Bayana pulled over the hem of her skirt, tightly hiding the boy's small body. You may withdraw. I will personally speak to the wet nurse about this matter. Go back and wait to be scolded. After they had gone far away, Bayana lowered her head to look at the little boy, secretly worrying. What should I do with you? Lant Burin Ariant. After the Marchioness passed away, the Marquis brought Lant home. But Bayana only learned of this long afterward. Anyone could tell at a glance how much he resembled the Marquis. Because of this, Bayana hated him. And before entering the palace to become the crown princess, she had always tormented Lant. She ordered the maids to make trouble for him every few days. No one ever tried to stop it. Some even took the lead in bullying him to curry favor with her. Lant silently endured all the malice, never making a sound even when faced with sticks and beatings. And in those eyes, Bayana saw her father's shadow. She cowardly redirected all the anger she couldn't vent toward the Marquis, transferring it entirely onto Lant. And the Marquis, the only one who could stop her, remained indifferent from beginning to end. Lant could only endure that painful period on his own. Thinking about it now, everything about this felt strange. Lant was the only heir of the Ariant family, although the Marquis never mentioned it. Aside from him, there was no one else who could inherit the title. It was said that the Marquis's younger brother had died many years ago. Then he should have acknowledged Lant's identity early on and stopped her actions. However, the Marquis merely settled Lant in a separate residence and had him study the knowledge required of a noble. In this lifetime, she wanted to raise him with her own hands. She decided to take him for treatment first. Come on, Lant. Lant looked at her with eyes shining and carefully placed his hand on top of hers. Lant was probably about 4 years younger than her, and in the future would grow into a man even taller than the Marquis. At this moment, the maids came back again, shouting as they hurried to find that child. If the young lady were to find out, things would only get worse. That damn little brat. you will absolutely not be spared. It seemed that in this household, many things were happening that she did not know about. In order to quickly figure out what was really going on, she took Lance straight to her father's office. As she pushed the door open, she instructed the butler to fetch medicine. Her father raised his eyes and asked her what had happened. He saw that Lance's small hands were covered in cuts and wounds, and his cheek also seemed slightly swollen. She asked, "May I ask who hit him?" Under the Marquis's gaze, Bayana felt somewhat uncomfortable and awkwardly admitted that it was she herself. His soft, squishy feel was too interesting, so she tugged him a bit. She had not expected it to turn out like this. It seems the child's skin is too delicate. Butler, thank you for your trouble. After the treatment is finished, bring some cake to my room as well. After saying that, she turned around and smiled at Lant and said, "Are you coming along too?" Looking at the tempting sweets in front of him, Lant felt both touched and at a loss. After receiving permission, Lant eagerly reached out, stuffing his mouth in big bites. Soft whispers sounded from behind. How rude. Truly a child that can't be shown to the light. Lant immediately stopped moving, trembling as he listened to those piercing remarks. Bayana saw all of this clearly. She could bully him, but other people could not. So she coldly ordered everyone to get out, and one maid could not help but retort, "You're talking back more and more, aren't you? Do you want me to personally throw you out?" After driving them away, she had just let out a sigh when Lant began to tremble uncontrollably. Since when have you been abused like this? She had never seriously considered forming a deep bond with anyone, and even keeping a child by her side did not seem like it would change anything in the future.
Do you want me to help you?
"If you are willing, I will treat you the way I treat a pet." He hesitated for a moment, then gently nodded. The girl told him, "If you make a mistake, you must be punished. Acting recklessly is, in itself, a mistake." Lant choked back sobs. "It hurts." Bayana was momentarily at a loss for words and could only hold Lant with heartache, softly comforting him. "Yes, if you don't like it." But deep in her heart, she quietly swore that she would first clean away every bit of gloom clinging to this little puppy of hers. Here, for the first time, she had something that belonged to her. Not long after, her scheduled conversation with the Marquis arrived. Looking at the human-shaped iceberg before her, Bayana made up her mind that in this lifetime, she must never raise Lant to become like him. "I need the best teachers in every field." The Marquis asked her what her reason was. "I want to personally educate him, Lant." The man paused slightly upon hearing this. "What are you thinking?" "As the name implies, please dismiss all of my teachers. I already know all that knowledge anyway, and I believe you will agree to this request. Then I'll be leaving first." Her father pressed on. "Why do you care about that child?" Bayana did not give much explanation, only calmly said, "He is mine. I cannot tolerate anyone bullying my little dog, so I am going to raise him." If Lant was to inherit the Marquis's title, then at the very least one could not be stingy with investment in his education. Although right now he was still just a cute little puppy, one day he would grow into a powerful beast that no one would dare underestimate, and the Ariant family would become that beast's wings. When the day came that the little puppy grew up, she opened the door and discovered maids eavesdropping outside, and her every move appeared extremely tense and highly suspicious. According to Bayana's instructions, Lance's room had already been moved to the main building, and because the wet nurse had forcibly interfered, the room was still quite far from her bedroom, but since they were in the same building, she decided to endure it for now. Yet the more she cared, the harder it was to fall asleep. Late at night, she decided to go and check whether her little puppy was sleeping properly. When passing by the wet nurse's room, she found it completely empty. Bayana instantly sensed that something was wrong and immediately sprinted toward Lance's room. "You still want to sleep?" A bastard that popped up from who knows where. "Don't ever think about stepping into this household. Why did you have to come and cause trouble for a young lady?" Bayana kicked the door open and realized that the wet nurse was capable of doing such a thing, something she had not known. "You picked the wrong person to mess with." Bayana loudly summoned the butler, and when he hurried over, she shielded Lant behind her, and on the spot declared that she had personally witnessed Lant being abused, accusing everyone present of being perpetrators. The wet nurse hurriedly explained, "You can't do this to me. Why did Madam die? It was because of him, this bastard." She coldly warned the wet nurse to watch herself. At this moment, the Marquis also appeared at the doorway. After that night, the wet nurse was thrown into prison to be punished. In consideration of the fact that she had raised the young lady with her own hands, Bayana personally pleaded with the Marquis, and in the end she was merely dismissed and expelled from the estate. After that, she reselected and arranged new attendants whom she could trust. Lant looked at her cautiously. "What is it, my little dog?" Filled with guilt, he lowered his head, not daring to meet her eyes. "Is it because of me that you're feeling so bad?" Bayana looked puzzled. "Don't overthink it. But those people all said so, said that my coming here would make you suffer, my lady." Bayana told him not to take that nonsense to heart. "You are my little dog. You only need to remember one thing. Big sister is the sky." At her coming-of-age ceremony, she officially held an engagement ceremony with the crown prince, but because of her young age, the eldest prince expressed opposition, so the wedding had not yet been held. At this moment, Bayana was certain that on her 16th birthday, she would become the crown princess. Before she knew it, for years quietly passed, and at last it was the day she married the crown prince. She had to think of a way. Seeing that her expression looked unwell, Sirius reached out worriedly. "Are you feeling unwell anywhere?" She froze for a moment, then immediately averted her gaze. This person had always been gentle to everyone. Sirius immediately stood up, saying he would go call the court physician. Bayana hurriedly stopped him. "It was just a bit of dizziness for the moment. Is it really nothing? Sorry to have worried you, Your Highness." In an instant, the atmosphere between the two became awkward. No matter how many times they spent together, she always felt immense pressure. The Emperor thought that having them meet 2 or 3 times a week would naturally warm their relationship, but the problem was never on her side. However, compared to the past, there was indeed some difference. If it were before, he would probably have only found her annoying. Now it seemed that at least he cared about her. But so what? She had no intention whatsoever of marrying this man. "We have been engaged for 2.5 years. The crown prince keenly sensed something amiss and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Bayana shook her head in denial. Your Highness had always treated her politely in the role of fiancé. "No, please tell me directly, did I do something bad to you? Being with me, does it make you feel uncomfortable? Answer me. Is it me who makes you feel uncomfortable?" Bayana hesitated for a moment. "If I say I'm uncomfortable, does that mean these meetings don't have to continue?" The crown prince looked incredulous, yet wore a wounded smile. "I am your fiancé. An engagement can be dissolved, Your Highness. Do you understand what that sentence means?" "I understand it very clearly. You want to break off the engagement with me?"
Why?
"Because I don't love Your Highness." Sirius was stunned for a moment, then laughed out loud without restraint. What a surprise. Bayana told him seriously that this was not a joke. "I really don't know whether you are naive or foolish. Among royalty and nobles, very few people marry for love. Marriage is merely a means to consolidate mutual interests. But if the ending is destined to be a tragedy, must one insist on taking that path? Life is short. She doesn't want to waste her time on the wrong person. My dream is to spend this entire life with the one I love." Bayana had never obtained such happiness, but she, Li Jia, was determined to seize her own share of happiness with her own hands. "The person by Your Highness's side doesn't necessarily have to be me, right? If there were a young lady with better conditions, wouldn't she be more suitable for Your Highness? You seem to have misunderstood one thing. There is no one with better conditions than you, Bayana." Even though she rejected him again and again, the crown prince still stubbornly said, "There is no one with better conditions than you, Bayana." Hearing this, she secretly made up her mind that she must do everything possible to stop this marriage. "I can help you choose a young lady with suitable conditions." Sirius retorted unhappily. "Even if there really were someone with better conditions than you, so what? We have already held the engagement ceremony. You have officially become my fiancé. Actually, there is an even simpler and easier way. Love me, Bayana." At the moment his lips were about to touch hers, Bayana raised her hand and slapped him. But her wrist was firmly seized by the man. When prey tries to escape, a hunter's instinct is to chase it down. "I am a very outstanding hunter, so you'd better not provoke me, my Bayana." The girl was on the verge of going crazy inside the carriage. She had already realized where the problem lay. Sirius had not yet met that woman, so what he needed now was his own power. Yet his reaction was completely unexpected. He neither lost his temper nor showed the slightest displeasure. Like a ferocious beast fixated solely on its prey, she should have slapped him hard across the face earlier, and then followed it up with a kick to make him airless for life. If things followed their natural course, and they eventually fell in love, then she could voluntarily step aside later, to seek the life that truly belonged to her, meet the one she loved, and live out her days in peace. But he sneered and said, "Do you think only hunters know how to hunt? Then just wait to be killed by the prey." As soon as she returned to the residence, Bayana went straight to the training ground to look for Lant. Seeing his sister appear, Lant's eyes instantly lit up, and he shouted, "Sister," as he dashed toward her. "Why did you run to the training ground?" Bayana grabbed his cheeks in one motion. "Didn't I tell you not to call me sister? What are you? A pretty boy acting cute while clinging to a rich woman?" Yet Lant happily clasped her hand. "Sister's words are the law of heaven. I have no objections." As he spoke, he even rubbed his face against her palm. "You don't look to be in a very good mood. Did something happen in the palace?" The girl pouted. "I got bitten by a mad dog." The simple-minded Lant hurriedly asked, "Were you hurt?" Bayana silently looked at him for a while, then suddenly hugged the boy around the waist and pulled him into her arms, leaving Lant at a loss for what to do. She buried her face against him and denied it in a muffled voice, just the scent of warm sunlight. At this moment, the butler came running over in a panic. Count Anning, the great merchant. is in critical condition. The grandfather, who had left not long ago, soon returned to her life again. He bought a residence near the Marquis' estate and often came to keep Bayana company, as if making up for the years he had neglected her. Yet his body grew weaker by the day. When Bayana and her father rushed over in haste, there was a small figure standing at the entrance, a little girl with rose-pink hair, grandfather's child. She wanted to rush into her father's room. Bayana picked up the child. "We can't let Ellie see what grandfather looks like right now." At that moment, the door was pulled open. "Nice to meet you, Mississippi. I am Evan Nianning." Bayana recognized him at a glance. He was the future heir of the Count. No one knew which country he actually came from, and the family had initially strongly opposed his right of succession, but in the end, he still smoothly inherited the Count's title. After that, the Anning family ushered in a golden age. Countless noble ladies competed to buy the luxury goods sold by the Count's family. It was said that even women's products sold like hotcakes. She hadn't expected him to have this kind of image. Rather than a merchant, he looked more like a knight. Ellie happily called out Evan. The man took the little girl and lifted her high. "You ran out again, leaving the nanny behind, didn't you?" "I miss Daddy." The man gently comforted her. "Daddy isn't feeling well right now. We'll see him another time." "Then when can I see him?" "When Ellie eats well, sleeps well, grows up nicely, and becomes pretty." Evan stepped aside from the doorway, gesturing for them to go in first, seeing Bayana's figure. Grandfather laboriously raised his hand, wanting to call her over. Sending off important people was not something she experienced for the first time. Even back when she was Li Ji-ah, she had seen far too many partings of life and death. Yet this moment was still unbearable. "Be forever happy, my child." Grandfather smiled, repeating "be happy" over and over, and then closed his eyes forever. The hand that had been resting on his granddaughter's hand also fell limply to the side. Bayana was unable to accept this reality for a moment. The Countess cried out in agony for her husband. "Please don't go." She collapsed beside the bed, crying her heart out. Grandfather's kindness and gentleness, little by little, tore down the high walls Bayana had built in her heart. Logically speaking, grandfather's days were already numbered. Yet she stubbornly held on for 4 more years, constantly preparing for her departure. Her father asked her with concern, "Are you okay?" Her tears could no longer be held back and slid down as she threw herself into her father's arms, sobbing in suppressed cries. The Marquis silently held her, staying with her until her tears ran dry. The Marquis's rare display of tenderness made her feel an unprecedented sense of surprise. At the family meeting that followed, Bayana did not expect things to turn out so badly. They refused to acknowledge that Evan was both Ellie's guardian and the heir to the Earl family's core business consortium. They even brought the Countess out to arbitrate. How could they allow a complete outsider with no blood relation to be Ellie's guardian? The Countess expressed her trust in him, but this only provoked more dissatisfaction. "Are you saying that compared to us, her own relatives, you trust an outsider more?" Accepting a woman of unknown origin into the family in the first place was a mistake. The authenticity of the will was impossible to determine. Bayana slammed her teacup down with a sharp crack. "My ears seem to be having some problems. Could I trouble you to say that again? Are you saying my grandmother had an affair? In that case, I can take those words as an insult to me." The man was so frightened that his legs went weak on the spot, and he fell to his knees in panic, begging for forgiveness. "The one who needs to ask for forgiveness doesn't seem to be me, does it?" What she meant was that he should apologize to the Countess. But the man was still unconvinced. "She's nothing more than a commoner who happened to marry into nobility. And the Marquis's daughter is about to become the Crown Prince's consort." Another retainer hurriedly stepped in to smooth things over. Young people make mistakes. It's unavoidable. At that moment, the oldest man present stepped forward to scold her. "Considering your young age, I have already been especially tolerant. This is not a place where a brat who hasn't even had a coming-of-age ceremony can butt in." Her gaze instantly turned cold. "May I ask, what is your esteemed name?" "Chris Esserla." After hearing it, she laughed even more brazenly. "That's a surname I've never heard of. I thought you had at least inherited the family name, but it turns out you're nothing at all. Yet you dare point fingers at me? That's right, I am a bona fide noble lady. No surname? No middle name? Then tell me, on what ground should I treat you with the respect due to a family elder? I advise you to know when to stop and not provoke me any further." Everyone present fell into dead silence for a moment, until another blind fool suddenly spoke up. "Miss, don't you yourself also lack the Earl family surname?" Bayana tilted her head and smiled, not even grasping the most basic knowledge of nobility. "Yet you dare call yourself a member of the Earl family. Whose negligence do you think that is?" "Bottolo is the name of the founding ancestor of the Earl family. By the authority vested in me through this name, I expel you from the family. And also, don't forget that you now bear an additional charge of impersonating nobility." After her grandfather's funeral ended, a week passed, and her appointment with the crown prince arrived once again. But the carriage did not take the road leading to Bissard Palace. Instead, it went straight to the emperor's bedchamber. His Majesty wore a beaming smile and urged her to come forward quickly. The crown prince pulled out a chair for her and affectionately called her Bayana. "Come over here." The man leaned close to her ear and praised her in a low voice. That deeply affectionate expression looked, no matter how one saw it, deliberately put on for the emperor. The emperor smiled so broadly he could hardly close his mouth. Truly a pleasing sight. "I hear you've been working hard lately." "No, your Majesty." She's still as serious as ever. Serious smoothed things over for her. Isn't that precisely where Bayana's charm lies? "Bayana, I'm truly disappointed in you. When will you finally relax around me a little? After all, we're about to become family very soon. You're already 16 this year, aren't you?" So that was why the crown prince had brought her here. The crown prince said expectantly, "There are only 3 months left until your coming-of-age ceremony. It's time to start preparing." Bayana immediately sensed danger that would directly turn into a wedding with the crown prince. The old emperor was also desperately trying to push the two together, wanting them to marry as soon as possible. But he never expected the girl to dig in her heels to the very end and announce that she did not plan to hold a coming-of-age ceremony at all. The little old man was so shocked on the spot that his eyes went round. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime ceremony for every citizen of the empire." Bayana wore a sorrowful expression. "My grandfather has been gone for less than 10 days. This subject truly has no strength to prepare any celebratory event." The emperor refused to let it go. "Then let this be your debut in high society. I can immediately hold a debut banquet for you." Bayana declined again and again. "Thank you for your Majesty's grace, but at a time like this, it truly would not be appropriate to hold a grand banquet." The old emperor was nearly driven mad with anger by her and roared out of control. Why? Neither of the two youngsters said a word. He cleared his throat, trying to salvage some dignity. "At the very least, you must make one appearance in high society." In the end, however, it was still gently refused by Bayana. "Then how long are you going to delay it?" "Next year, at court." Seeing his father so flustered and furious, it was the first time I've ever seen this. He couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into loud laughter. "You unfilial brat. What are you laughing at? Your son has been discourteous." But what Bayana says is not without reason. Don't you think her filial piety is deeply moving? Please be understanding of her current situation. Which side are you even on? Of course, my fiancé's side. Doesn't your Majesty find Bayana's filial devotion touching? Please be understanding of her situation. The old emperor had no choice but to yield reluctantly. The crown prince followed closely behind her the whole way, and Bayana felt uncomfortable all over. "Your Highness, just how far do you intend to follow me?" Escorting one's fiancé out of the palace is a fiancé's proper duty. What an eye-opener. Sirius suddenly leaned toward her forehead, using the dead as a shield. "Looks like I underestimated you, Bayana. That's nothing compared to your Highness's skill in using His Majesty as a weapon." Seeing Bayana's extremely unwilling expression, Sirius instead laughed with great enjoyment. "Looks like you really got the upper hand on me." It was the first time she had seen the crown prince laugh so heartily, and she only felt as if she had suffered a silent loss, making her feel miserable. A madman like this is safer to keep at a distance. The crown prince suddenly grabbed her arm, bending down to whisper near her ear, deliberately closing the distance. "I clearly warned you not to provoke me." Bayana immediately shot back. "I never gave your Highness permission to address me with a pet name. To think I'd be rejected by my own fiancé." She really wanted to punch him on the spot, but under so many eyes, she truly couldn't make a move. She warned coldly, "Since we are an engaged couple, the prey can also bite the hunter back." After saying that, she stomped down hard with one foot. Unfortunately, she wasn't wearing high heels today, otherwise, she would definitely have crushed the top of his foot. What a truly headache-inducing existence. "You trouble me to no end, Bayana." As his words fell, he gently placed a kiss on her forehead. After Bayana returned to the estate, she immediately ordered the maid to go to Bevdi Street. Her mind was in complete turmoil. What exactly does the crown prince want? Could it be that he really intends to court her and speak of love? Clearly, this round seemed like her victory, yet his reaction was not at all that of a defeated man, but rather as if the more he fought, the more excited he became. Exactly which step was it that went wrong? At this moment, the maid reminded her, "Miss, Bevdi Street has arrived." Just as she was about to get out of the carriage, she was bumped straight into by a boy coming from the opposite direction. Red paint was smeared all over her, staining the entire hem of her dress. The maid was just about to flare up and scold him, when Bayana thought to herself, "I almost ended up acting like one of those third-rate villainesses from comics, putting on airs of nobility and throwing my weight around. How ridiculous." At this moment, Evan hurried over, calling out the boy's name, Ray, as he came, and when he saw Bayana, he couldn't help but freeze for a moment. Ray, who was kneeling on the ground, addressed him as captain. The man bowed to her and apologized. "Long time no see,
Evan.
There are too many onlookers, let's change clothes first. So Bayana was invited to the third floor of the jewelry shop. Even in her previous life as Empress, she hadn't known this shop had a third floor. Evan asked her to wait here for a moment. As she looked around at the furnishings, she always felt an indescribable sense of discord. This shop was called Louisa, targeting noble women as its main market, with one of a kind as its slogan. It precisely struck the vanity of noble ladies. Its products emphasized uniqueness, and uniqueness meant nobility. One had to admire Evan's business acumen. Without a thorough analysis of female psychology, such an idea would never have occurred to anyone. Could it be that beneath a knight's armor was hidden such a delicate mind? The maid selected 3 luxurious gowns for the young lady. Bayana felt it was too exaggerated, and in the end changed into an elegant yellow dress. Thinking back to those years, Bayana squandered astronomical sums for the sake of vanity, relying entirely on the rewards she received each year upon entering the palace and her own private assets. Although she had inherited a large fortune from her mother and grandfather, it was still far from enough to sustain her extravagance. Yet before being placed under house arrest, she had never noticed any shortage of funds, as if her wealth were an inexhaustible spring. Where exactly did that immense fortune come from? At this moment, Evan entered with Ray to apologize. With her clothes dirted, she wouldn't go so far as to erupt in anger on the spot, but it certainly wasn't something she could simply laugh off. This child's recklessness could very well affect the reputation of the Earl's Merchant Guild. She saw very clearly that when Evan rushed toward this child earlier, his face was filled with worry. For the overall person in charge of the shop, this child was important to such an extent. And to make matters worse, he even had the same hair color as that woman. Truly an eyesore. Did he even have the exact same eye color? How should I deal with you, I wonder? She let out a soft laugh and said with a playful expression, "Should I kill this child?" The boy was so frightened that his whole body trembled, and even Evan's expression tightened in response. "Even if I killed you right here and now, no one would be able to stop me, not even that man you trust so much. This is the mistake you made," she discovered unexpectedly. This child's eyes. Evan suddenly reached out, pulling her away from Ray's side. Then, with a face full of worry, he lowered his voice and pleaded, "It seems you have a lot you want to say." The boy grabbed the corner of her skirt. Bayana reached out and gently patted his head. "You don't know who you are?" An Ayari is a tribal nation located in the west of the empire. They live in the desert, possessing human bodies, yet having cat-like pupils. Whenever their emotions are agitated or their thoughts fluctuate, their pupils contract vertically. Although this child's eyes have that characteristic, he is not pure-blooded. Unlike the unique wheat-colored skin found among those in the desert, the Empire is even more hostile toward mixed blood in Ayari. Do you know? Just because of a single moment of carelessness on your part, you could put everyone around you in danger. If you don't want to drag the people around you down with you, then stay vigilant at all times. Seeing that tears fell from his eyes, "You feel wronged, don't you? Just because you dirted one piece of clothing, you were reprimanded like this. If you truly feel wronged, truly unwilling to accept it, then become strong. So strong that no one can casually lay a hand on you, so that even knowing your identity, they would still not dare touch a single hair on your head. If you can't do that, then hide in the shadows and live your entire life there, because that is the only way to prolong your life and the lives of those around you." After saying this, she ordered the maid to take the child out. "Let's hear your story first, before pursuing the matter of your rudeness toward me." Evan offered a solemn apology. "To be honest, I don't know where to begin. As a merchant, aren't you best at using words to confuse your opponents?" The man said somewhat sheepishly that even the Earl often laughed that he didn't look like a merchant at all, but more like a knight. Grandfather clearly knew his temperament, yet still entrusted the Merchant Guild to him. "What exactly did he see in you?" "You are very much like the Earl, my lady. I noticed it the first time we met." Bayana felt somewhat puzzled. What kind of look was that? She disliked Evan's unconditional protection of that child, which was why she spoke so harshly to him. But why would he still look at her with that deep gaze? It was truly baffling. In truth, Evan knew very well in his heart that Bayana's earnest admonitions toward Ray were meant to let him live on. Because he was a mixed blood in Ayari, the Merchant Guild had to be even more cautious. "Miss, you were actually warning him, weren't you? For the child's sake. Since you understand all this, are you planning to do nothing and just let him keep causing trouble outside?" Hearing this, Evan could no longer suppress his emotions. "As expected, I wasn't mistaken. Miss truly is very much like the Earl. The Earl once harshly reprimanded us as well. Yet afterward, he reached out his hand and saved me, who was struggling like a madman just to survive. Without his mercy, I would no longer be alive today. He also rescued many children from prison, including Ray. The Earl knew that child's background, so why did he still? That was a form of atonement." She seemed to already have an answer in her heart. In a corner where they could not see, Grandfather spent his entire life saving abandoned children, using the latter half of his life to atone to his daughter and granddaughter. There were many children saved this way, most of whom served the Merchant Guild. So when Grandfather handed the Merchant Guild to Evan, perhaps he needed someone who could guard it together with him. someone who could shoulder the secrets together. But there was still an unsolved mystery. Was Evan really just the owner of this merchant guild? He looked steady and righteous, yet no matter how one looked at him, he did not seem like the person who created Louisa. Was the true designer someone else? At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Evan pulled it open, only to see grandmother standing outside. Why would she be here? Many years ago, grandfather traveled the world, saving countless children with special talents, and made an agreement with them to use the rest of his life to protect Bayana. And today, grandmother chose to speak this truth. Combined with the shop name Louisa, everything finally made sense. Louis was her affectionate name for grandfather, and Yasha was grandfather's affectionate name for Bayana. The true owner of Louisa was her. Only realizing this now, she herself was truly laughable. And Nasa lowered her head and handed over the things grandfather had left behind. Compared to me, are you acting like that on purpose? Just to deceive grandfather and take control of the merchant guild? Even if she deceived herself and her daughter, it did not matter much. Grandfather passed away peacefully under her care, and she herself did not truly lose anything. This is something your mother used when she was little. I don't need it. Are you still unwilling to acknowledge her as your mother? Stop meddling. Bayana, I hate you. And Nasa froze. What? What's the point of saying all this? I just want to hurry home and lie down on my bed. As long as you're willing, you can have everything. So why are you wearing that kind of expression? Shouldn't the one hysterically screaming right now be her? So what exactly are you trying to say? Aren't you curious why I'm here? That's why I hate you. You always look like you see through everything. Indifferent to the people around you. The way high society talks about you, you probably don't care at all, right? Anyway, they're not charging at me with knives. Why should I care? Just the things I want to do already keep me too busy. Caring about others' gazes, living according to someone else's template, is too exhausting. When she was Li Jia, she had already lived an entire life of plain ordinariness. There was no need to repeat it. Do you know how worried grandfather was about you? Would my living so freely really make him worry? No matter how I think about it, I can't understand that. Although during this time, I've been living according to my own wishes. From a bystander's perspective, I've actually been pretty well behaved, haven't I? I've just been staying in the manor with Lant. And Nasa sighed helplessly. Then why did you acknowledge Ellie's right of inheritance? You also know that Ellie is disabled, and by rights the inheritance should have been revoked. But as long as you stood up in the name of the progenitor to oppose it, that will would never be able to take effect. There was no need to fight over that single title. Do you really have no ambition at all? How is that possible? You're not a saint, who in this world is completely without greed. Then why don't you want the title? You could clearly hold both the countship and the marquisate at the same time. It seems you've forgotten that I am the crown prince's fiancé. Are you saying that I've been delaying my coming of age ceremony just to put this off? Only the emperor and the crown prince know about this. Where did you hear it? That's not the point. To me, this is very important, because what you just said is equivalent to admitting that you planted informants around me. Bayana, I didn't spy on you. It's just that there are many informants in the palace, and I happen to have a connection with one of them. Bayana raised an eyebrow. Impressive skills. If you want to run such a large company, methods like these are necessary. I have only one last question. Why do you want nothing at all? Not just titles, whether it's people or things. You seem to hold nothing in your heart. Family, to you? Family has no special meaning to me. Anessa looked at you with tears in her eyes. You live as if you could disappear at any moment. Do you know how unsettling that makes the people around you? I don't like that kind of person. Someone who clearly receives all of his care and love, yet still acts indifferent. I hate you, and I don't want to know how much he's done for you. Even so, you look so much like him that one can't help but feel affection for you. And thank you as well for always protecting Ellie. Only at this moment did Bayana finally completely let go of the doubts in her heart. Anasa approached the Count not to seize his property, but to accompany him until the very end, because she truly loved grandfather. What exactly was the relationship between these two? Evan spoke up to explain. Anasa was also one of the people saved by the Count, like seeing light suddenly appear in a pit of utter despair. We once lived lives that were both miserable and painful, and he chose to save us, all because of you. The Count traveled all over the world, gathering children with special abilities. Especially Anasa, her abilities at work were almost flawless. As long as he saw talent, the Count would not hesitate to provide sponsorship. And all of this was for you. The true owner is not me, but you, Miss Bayana. Then why didn't you tell me until now? Anasa said that because it was impossible to completely guarantee her safety, they could only hide her. You are the Crown Prince's fiancé. Forces opposing the Crown Prince have long been keeping their eyes on you. If all the assets were placed under your name, they would be thinking of eliminating you right now. Bayana pondered. Then why had Anasa in her previous life not spoken the truth either? At that time, what was different between her and the present her? She said it was because you monopolized grandfather's care, so she hated you, and also said that you were very much like him and loved him dearly. In the end, she even said thank you for protecting Ellie before she was born. At that time, she did not tell Bayana the truth, because she wanted to vent her resentment and take revenge on a child who had already died. But even so, in order to repay grandfather's kindness, she would still do everything she could to support her. That seemingly inexhaustible wealth was in fact also a setup grandfather had arranged for the merchant guild and for her. At this moment, Evan knelt on one knee, vowing lifelong loyalty to my master. The day to enter the palace again had arrived. Biana lowered her head and looked at the ring in her hand. The count used the shield-bearing eagle as the family crest, and all other shops adopted this design, except for Louisa, which used a 4-leaf clover. The symbol of the family would be engraved into a seal. After a noble held their coming-of-age ceremony, they would possess a seal of their own. When she was invested as the crown princess at her 16th coming-of-age ceremony, the crown princess's seal was the seal that belonged exclusively to her. This ring was specially crafted by grandfather for her coming-of-age ceremony. From the moment she was born, he had been preparing for this day. For the dangers and happiness she might encounter in the future, he continually discovered and cultivated people who could step in to help at critical moments. Anasa and Evan were representatives of these people. To be on the safe side, he had Evan take the position at the head of the merchant guild. I will become your support, and Evan is your will. I became his wife for one reason as well, to be able to see you more easily. The first time you spoke to him about the child, I thought you were humiliating me. After all, he and I had only been together that one time. I planned to live my entire life for you, so I only asked him to hold me once. These words sound shameless and embarrassing, but fortunately I summoned the courage back then because I obtained that child. He had only one request of us: protect you. To uphold that promise, we could do anything. For more than 4 years, grandfather had treated her in such a gentle way. In her previous life, he had probably already prepared all of this for her as well, hadn't he? Biana felt a turmoil of emotions. Only when everything became beyond remedy did she truly understand that weight. At this moment, someone from the palace came to escort her. The visitor was an attendant from the Civil Palace, belonging to the Queen's household. His Highness the Crown Prince is away and has not returned, so Her Majesty the Queen has sent this humble servant to escort you. Biana was just about to return along the original route when she was stopped. Her Majesty the Queen is waiting for you. She had no way to refuse, even if this empress was merely a puppet. The people standing behind her were the ones who truly could not be taken lightly. Soon, she was taken to the Empress's palace, and the moment she stepped inside, she saw the Empress, whose gaze was always drifting and unfocused, and the Grand Consort, whose eyes were sharp like a venomous snake. Biana bent down in a formal salute. Greetings to the moon of the Empire, and may peace be upon Her Highness the Consort. Welcome, Yang Ai. The Empress gestured to her. Sit down quickly. The consort put on a benevolent expression and spoke. The Empress said she wanted to see Yang Ai, so I volunteered to come along. I'll keep you company. Would that be all right? Biana saw through her ill intentions at a glance. The one who summoned her to the palace today was probably not the Empress, but the Grand Consort who manipulated her from behind the scenes. What Her Highness the Consort says is naturally correct. May I ask, Your Majesty, for what reason did you summon this subject? The Empress subconsciously glanced at the consort's expression. What special reason could there be? The Empress has no peers of her age in the palace and feels lonely. If Yang Ai could often keep the Empress company, that would be wonderful. Don't you agree? The Empress immediately echoed her. Yes, Biana already had everything under control. From the consort's tone, she could almost hear that she usually trampled all over the Empress as well. The two suddenly brought up her grandfather's matter. That incident caused quite a stir, didn't it? I heard Yang Ai abandoned her own family. Whether in the past or the present, the Grand Consort always wore a gentle smile while speaking vicious words. Her Highness the Consort seems especially concerned about my family affairs. Perhaps we will soon become one family. Since we are about to be family, caring for each other is only natural. The Grand Consort was the eldest daughter of the Earl of Morton. Despite already being engaged, she voluntarily entered the palace to become the Emperor's consort. And by giving birth to the Emperor's eldest son, she seized the position of Grand Consort in one stroke, even forcibly elevating her natal family, the Earl of Morton, to marquisate status. Before the birth of the 6th prince, the 1st prince was once regarded as the provisional crown prince, so the Grand Consort possessed authority second only to the Empress. Until the day the 6th prince was born, the world of that mother and son was completely rewritten. To them, the crown prince was like a thorn in the flesh. So, in the eyes of the Grand Consort, Biana was likewise a thorn in the eye. But this had nothing to do with Biana not wanting to marry. She simply did not want to lose to the Grand Consort. The 1st prince's consort still hasn't had any news of a child, has she? Seeing that we are about to become one family, it's truly worrying. I hear it's already been more than 10 years since the marriage. Is that right, Your Majesty? The 1st prince had 1 primary consort and 3 secondary consorts, yet even at 35 years old, he remained without an heir. Having no successor was a fatal weakness for the consort. Thank you for being so concerned. I never expected Yang Ai to have such a kind side. You flatter me. Your Highness the Consort. With such a kind heart, young E, it really makes one wonder. How could there be such rumors about you? Bayana replied calmly. I'm also curious. What kind of rumors? Isn't it said that you once embraced a man tightly on the street? Clearly you're about to become the crown princess. So how could there be such absurd gossip? I'm really worried about how others will view you. It seemed that the rumors had started fermenting from the day she met Evan. If it reached the crown prince's ears, what would he do in a fit of anger? Yang Yi, you must conduct yourself properly. Once these two spread it, the rumor would soon be treated as established fact. Worthy of a consort indeed. No one was more adept at exploiting rumors. In her previous life, Bayana had stumbled over this very move every time. The worst possible outcome now would be having the charge of unchastity pinned on her, leading to the annulment of her engagement to the crown prince. And that was obviously the situation the consort wanted to see. Annulment did sound somewhat tempting, but once labeled an unchaste woman, it would be hard for her to gain a foothold in high society. She already bore rumors of being an illegitimate child, which would hinder Lance's inheritance of the Marquis title, and she couldn't hide in her maternal home forever. Even if she returned to the Earl's side, she would probably only become a burden. Join a merchant guild? In truth, there was no way out. Even if the engagement were broken, she could still survive. But there was no reason to let her take advantage like this. Speaking of which, Your Highness the Consort, it seems you yourself were once involved in that kind of scandal. Weren't you? The first prince was born 35 years ago. That just happened to be during the period when you abandoned your fiancé and entered the palace. Back then, didn't His Majesty also get angry with you? Not long after being titled consort, she became pregnant with the first prince. To stabilize the imperial bloodline, everyone claimed the first prince looked exactly like the emperor. And although this quelled some of the rumors, the doubts were never completely erased. 35 years had passed. She probably never expected anyone to still remember that old affair, did she? Come on, let's see how you'll respond. The grand consort flew into a rage and lost her composure on the spot. You're truly outrageously bold. Covering her mouth, she chuckled softly. If I were to become empress in the future, as the head of the harem, wouldn't I need even more of such boldness to suppress those below me? In the imperial palace, there are far too many people who don't even recognize their own place, yet foolishly dream of climbing higher. The grand consort warned coldly. Going too far isn't called courage, it's called recklessness. Sometimes, recklessness can also be a kind of strength. What kind of strength? The empress, caught in the middle, was at a loss and could only hastily change the subject. Young Ai's coming-of-age ceremony is approaching soon, isn't it? I'm very curious. How are your preparations going? For Her Majesty to trouble herself over such a matter. Aren't coming-of-age ceremonies all conducted according to custom? It only happens once in a lifetime, and besides, Yang Ai's ceremony holds special significance. No one knew that she was actually planning not to hold a coming-of-age ceremony. Was this deliberate? Oh my, I almost forgot. It seems there is no noble lady preparing the coming-of-age rite for Yang Ai. Is there? Was she trying to force her to admit aloud that she would not hold the ceremony? Originally, Bayana had indeed planned to say so. But with the grand consort provoking her again and again, her thoughts instead changed. Since no one can preside over the coming-of-age ceremony, the grand consort suggested that she herself could preside over it. What does Yang Ai think? This matter would soon spread through high society, and by then, no one would dare oppose the consort. She was still hesitating, wondering whether to ask Anassa, though that might invite gossip behind her back.
Just as she was about to speak,
Suddenly, a hand gently rested on her shoulder. Thank you for Your Highness's kindness, but my grandmother has already decided to preside over the ceremony. As he spoke, he affectionately took Bayana's hand. I've missed you very much. The Empress rose in disbelief. Please forgive my rudeness, Your Majesty. I heard that my fiancé was here, and I could not sit idly by. The consort spoke with provocation. The Empire's crown prince truly has an overwhelming presence. Please take good care of your health. Sirius's aura only grew stronger. I am in the prime of my youth, and facing my fiancé, whose coming-of-age ceremony is about to be held. It's hard not to lose control a little. Having completely gained the upper hand, the crown prince's eyes were filled with mockery. He wrapped one arm around his fiancé's slender waist. And not only did Bayana not dodge, she instead hooked her arm around his and snuggled into his embrace coquettishly. Why did you come so late? I've been suffering here waiting for you, Your Highness. The crown prince immediately played along. I didn't expect to see you here. Then, going with the flow, he lowered his head and placed a kiss. If you had come straight to the palace to find me, you wouldn't have had to wait here so painfully. Bayana widened her eyes. The consort was still watching from the side. Did she think she wouldn't dare? It was Her Majesty the Empress who asked the subject to come here. As she spoke, she threw herself pitifully into Sirius's arms to seek comfort. While in the shadows, she viciously pinched his waist with her small hand. After succeeding, she revealed a satisfied smile. Sirius's ears immediately burned bright red. Today was time specially granted by His Majesty for the two of us to be alone. It seems Her Majesty the Empress has forgotten this matter. I'm not mistaken, am I? The Empress dared not defy the imperial decree and could only go along with it. But the consort was unwilling to give up and pressed on. Will the Duchess of Garfield serve as the host of Bayana Yang Ai's coming-of-age ceremony? The Crown Prince replied with a polite smile. Yes. To her, Yang Ai is a future granddaughter-in-law who will marry into the family. The Grand Consort, trembling with anger, ground her teeth and said, "Then that is truly wonderful. The coming-of-age ceremony will be held at the Marquis's residence, won't it? The imperial family cannot attend Yang Ai's coming-of-age rite as mere spectators. Surely you are aware of this? His Majesty has already prepared the coming-of-age ceremony for my fiancé at Ailhak Hall. If the Grand Consort is interested, she may attend as well." Hearing this, the consort was so jealous, she nearly lost all composure. That was the most magnificent and splendid hall in the imperial palace, opened only for state-level ceremonies. A mere yonge of a marquise family actually holding a coming-of-age ceremony in a place like that. Does that make any sense? Sirius corrected her on the spot. Bayana is my fiancé, the future crown princess. Making such a decision without even the queen knowing, this is simply impossible. When she received no response for a long time, she couldn't help raising her voice to question. Isn't that so, Your Highness the Crown Prince? I really can't stand watching this anymore. This is His Majesty's ruling. Even the Queen cannot go against it. The Queen lowered her head tremblingly and echoed, "The Crown Prince is right. Since Her Majesty the Queen has already agreed, then I ask you, Your Highness the Imperial Consort, not to commit another act of disloyalty." After saying that, he wrapped an arm around Bayana, signaling that they could leave. "Then we shall take our leave." After the two of them exited the door, Bayana lifted her gaze to look at Sirius. Was he angry? Before she could think further, Sirius suddenly scooped her up in a bridal carry, lifting her at the waist, his gaze so resolute it was as if he were making an oath. To declare his claim, he carried his fiancée and almost paraded her through the entire palace. Bayana pushed at him, telling him to put her down. Sirius fell silent for a moment, then reluctantly loosened his hold. Sirius finally couldn't hold it in any longer and spoke. "Why exactly did you enter the palace?" Bayana immediately frowned warily. "Didn't I say not to let you come?" She deliberately pretended not to hear. "Is there a problem?" Sirius sighed helplessly. "You need to stay alert to the people around you. Someone has been obstructing contact between you and me." Bayana's heart sank as she immediately thought of the Grand Imperial Consort. Almost no one knew I wouldn't be in the palace today, so the only one left with the greatest suspicion is her. Bayana froze. Had the Crown Prince rushed over immediately after hearing she entered the palace? Why? Was it because he was worried about her? Sirius sighed. "Since things have come to this, we can only go with the flow. Your coming-of-age ceremony." Only then did Bayana react. "You lied to the Imperial Consort?" The Crown Prince, guilty to the point of not daring to lift his head, instantly turned his gaze aside. "This is your coming-of-age ceremony. It couldn't possibly be held without permission. But you just made up such an absurd, outrageous lie. How do you plan to wrap it up?" He hurriedly explained, "The ceremony isn't fake. His Majesty did indeed say it would be held for you in Ailhak Hall. But I also said it before, what you're unwilling to hold isn't the so-called coming-of-age ceremony. More precisely, it's the wedding ceremony bundled together with it. How about we each take a step back? However much you step back, I'll step back the same. Whatever you want, I'll satisfy." Bayana answered crisply, "Then are you willing to break off the engagement with me?" Sirius immediately bristled. "The engagement absolutely cannot be broken. Ask for something else. I'll do my best to satisfy it." But other than breaking off the engagement, she truly wanted nothing at all. Seeing Bayana remain silent, Sirius let out a long sigh. Although the engagement can't be annulled, the wedding can be delayed. Bayana immediately beamed. "Great, I understand, everyone gives a little." But Sirius awkwardly stared at her intently. "Do you have anything else to say? You're really a strange person." Bayana looked speechless. "I think I'm pretty normal." He still had a whole lot he wanted to say, but now really wasn't the time. So, he once again solemnly reminded Bayana to avoid running into the Grand Imperial Consort if possible. "That woman's mouth is like a poisoned blade. You don't yet have the ability to confront her head-on." Bayana knew it well enough, but I'm just a small Marquise Yonge. There's no way I have the power to refuse a summons from the Imperial Consort. Sirius laughed instead. "Oh my fiancé is really quite good at pretending to be modest." As soon as the words fell, he suddenly bent down close to her ear and murmured in a low voice, "Teasing the Imperial Consort isn't something just anyone can pull off. Isn't it said that the most interesting thing in the world is watching others tear into each other? There's no need to end the good show so early." Sirius's sudden closeness instantly ignited Bayana's temper. Unfortunately, When she stomped down hard, she stepped on nothing but air. The crown prince laughed smugly. I won't fall for the same trick a second time. Before he could finish speaking, his calf was suddenly attacked by Bayana. Sirius cried out in pain and immediately squatted down, desperately rubbing his shin. Bayana took the opportunity to lean down and strike with a close-range finisher. I never used the same move twice, Your Highness. With the palace making intensive preparations, the coming-of-age ceremony kicked off at full speed. Anasa keenly realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and immediately finalized a plan to use Bayana as a model to promote the Louisa clothing and jewelry shop. Bayana changed into a dazzling, luxurious red gown, truly worthy of Louisa's name. Seeing his sister dressed like this, Land exclaimed excitedly, when did you become so beautiful? How's the craftsmanship of the artisans in our shop? Anasa walked over holding a jewelry box filled with gems. Congratulations on officially entering adulthood. This is Evan's coming-of-age gift for you. It's a pity he couldn't give it to you in person. Bayana gently touched the gemstone that complemented her gown. I really like it, and I'm also glad I decided to promote Louisa at my coming-of-age ceremony. Since you've personally come forward as an endorser, Anasa laughed heartily. Then, of course, all of this belongs to you. Bayana replied confidently, my desires are greater than you imagine. Even if you piled all the money in the world before me, I'd still find it insufficient and toss everyone into chaos. So, everyone keep your spirits up. Lant lowered his head somewhat dejectedly. He also wanted to attend his sister's coming-of-age ceremony. Bayana rubbed his hair to comfort him. Endure it for another 4 years. When it's your coming-of-age ceremony, even if you want to run, I'll drag you back and personally escort you to the venue. At the same time, Anasa felt uneasy in her heart. Could she really attend Bayana's coming-of-age ceremony? Bayana gazed at her. Anasa, I understand all those worries in your heart. The gossip of high society may surge like a tide. Even if they've already tacitly accepted that we're a family, I still can't treat you as ordinary family. Before she could finish speaking, Anasa's gaze dimmed. Because you're more than family. You're my most important, most precious friend. So please hold your head high and attend my coming-of-age ceremony with dignity. I'll see you at the banquet hall. No absences allowed. She turned and left. Lant, like a little deer waiting anxiously for its owner to come home, caught up in 3 quick strides, his warm palm covering the back of her hand, his smile brighter than spring sunlight. I like you the most. Bayana froze for a moment. I like you too, but if you could stop calling me sister, that would be even better. Seeing Lance's head droop instantly, she couldn't help laughing. The two walked side by side. Their marquis father had long been standing there quietly, his gaze piercing through layers of dusk and resting firmly on his daughter. At parting, Lant hooked his arm around his sister's, smiling with curved brows and eyes. Sister, take care on the road. May flowers accompany you all the way. The air was so quiet that only the sound of breathing flowed. Every past occasion of being alone with the Marquis, that suffocating sense of tension had always followed her like a shadow. Had she known it would be like this, she should have forcibly dragged Anasa along as a shield. The Marquis watched his daughter's slightly uneasy expression, complex, indistinct emotions surging in his eyes. After arriving at the palace, the Marquis stepped out of the carriage first, then immediately turned and extended his hand to his daughter. Bayana paused slightly. Her father, always so serious as to be nearly cold, actually showing such a gentle gesture. But father had always valued etiquette. This was probably just observing protocol. She lightly placed her hand into that palm that was both unfamiliar and familiar. As a child, she never had such an opportunity. Yet the Marquis's hand never let go. Bayana lifted her gaze and collided with her father's eyes, full of reluctance to part. You are very beautiful today. These brief words were like a stone thrown into still water, sending ripples through the lake of her heart. She suddenly recalled that, at some point unknown, father had begun appearing at the dining table more often, entrusting most of the household affairs to her with confidence. Fragments of memory pieced themselves together. Perhaps it was from the day after mother's funeral onward, that man who once only wore a cold expression quietly began, clumsily, to learn how to love. Bayana's eyes warmed, yet she lifted a bright smile. Today is my coming-of-age ceremony. I should of course make my entrance in my best form. Seeing that radiant smile on his daughter's face, the tightly drawn string in the Marquis's heart finally loosened slowly. He gently tightened his grip on her hand, leading her toward Alehack Hall. At this moment, inside the hall, nobles whispered among themselves, speculating whether this coming-of-age ceremony would directly turn into a romantic wedding. The imperial consort listened to these words as her expression grew, increasingly dark, until the grand door slowly opened. All eyes snapped in unison toward the father and daughter, walking in arm. Bayana held her father's arm, her step steady and composed. She knew well that this was not only her first step into high society, but also the starting point from which she would personally rewrite her destiny. In an instant, the entire hall erupted in an uproar. They saw Bayana draped in a gown unlike any seen before. She curled her lips in satisfaction, The goal of promotion had been fully achieved. The Crown Prince Sirius, who had waited for her for so long, stood there motionless, like a little dog looking up in anticipation. The father and daughter bowed to the crowd, and Sirius almost couldn't wait to grasp Bayana's hand. "Tonight, you're so beautiful it makes one forget how to breathe." With that, he bent down and placed a light kiss. Bayana, however, regarded all of it as nothing more than a fleeting act. Sirius's gaze burned with intensity. "Would you be willing to grant your fiancé the privilege of the first dance?" To block countless potential rumors, Bayana smiled and nodded. He naturally wrapped an arm around her slender waist, his eyes surging with a tenderness almost enough to drown someone. This was her first time truly holding a coming-of-age ceremony, yet on the same day in her previous life. It had been her wedding to the Crown Prince. Sirius suddenly tightened his arm, pulling her straight into his embrace.
Just look at me.
This abrupt action left Bayana a little at a loss. "This is my coming-of-age ceremony. I still need to greet many people." There was a plainly visible sense of disappointment in Sirius's tone. "I thought you were finally willing to start trying to love me." "No such intention." "Then have you ever thought about giving it a try?" Bayana coldly pondered in her heart. The moment he saw her, everything would deviate from its current course, so she replied flatly, "This matter isn't worth considering at all." Sirius's heart tightened. "You really are someone completely impossible to see through." Their gazes met, yet she hurriedly looked away, repeatedly reminding herself to stay calm. Sirius still refused to give up. "What I said today about you being beautiful came from my true feelings." Bayana gave no response, yet her heart was full of doubts. Is the Crown Prince always like this? Or has something already quietly changed? Is it me, unconsciously beginning to long for his love again? Absolutely not. 2 years later, Duke Daisa entered the capital with his daughter, and she had to gather as much intelligence as possible in the shortest amount of time. Records about them were exceedingly scarce, almost as vague as those about Yang Ei. The current Duke of Daisa had lived in seclusion in his territory for many years. His father had once been the former crown prince, but because he remained childless for so long, he lived his life full of regret. Until one day, news finally spread that the crown princess was with child. The former emperor celebrated grandly for this, holding a magnificent ceremony. But the good times did not last. Before the crown princess gave birth, her husband died in a fatal riding accident, and the former emperor fell gravely ill from the pain of losing a son, eventually passing away. Before his death, he personally bestowed the name Daisa upon his unborn grandson. And when the current emperor carried out a bloody purge of the imperial clan, he alone spared this Duke of Daisa, who held no right of succession to the throne. Yet burdened with imperial blood all the same, people still called him the fallen prince. From the day of his birth, he had been sent off to a distant territory, never once setting foot in the capital in his entire life. This time was his first departure from that closed-off land, solely to allow his daughter to make her debut in high society. Although there were very few who had actually seen them in person, Bayana recognized him at a glance, simply because, like the crown prince, he possessed golden pupils symbolic of the royal family. And his daughter was even more stunningly beautiful. Her sky-blue hair cascaded like a waterfall, her figure slender and light, with an innocent and harmless appearance that could instantly arouse a man's protective instinct even without doing anything. That face, free of any shadows, smiling like sunshine, was completely different from Bayana's. From the very first glance, Bayana instinctively felt disgust. That expression of instantly reddening eyes at the slightest reproach looked both affected and glaring to Bayana. Eileen Sichel Daisa, seeing Bayana's face turn as pale as snow. Evan immediately knelt down, his face full of concern. Bayana rubbed her temples tiredly. It was just a migraine, nowhere near serious enough to require calling a doctor. Every time she thought of that person, her emotions would surge like unstoppable tides. To avoid that marriage, she had devoted nearly all her thoughts to scheming, and the paths before her were only two: either transfer the Daisa father and daughter to the imperial capital before the wedding, or directly postpone the wedding until after Eileen arrived in the capital. However, to obtain more information, Bayana ordered Evan to send people to the west, insisting on a thorough investigation of everything about Duke Daisa, especially details concerning his daughter. She also mentioned that the gift for Lant had already been prepared. After Evan left, Bayana was just about to take a short rest when the door was suddenly pushed open. The one who barged in was none other than Ray, who was usually so afraid of her that he trembled. The moment he entered, he kept apologizing nonstop for his previous recklessness. Bayana reminded him coldly to be more mindful in the future. "Not all nobles are as easygoing as I am. Now get out. I never allowed you to enter here at will." As soon as the words fell, Ray suddenly straightened his back, braced himself, and shouted loudly, "Please tell me how to become stronger." Bayana raised her eyes to examine him, that messy head of hair, and a face full of childishness. Ray hurriedly added, "I want to protect Bayana, so I must become stronger. Please, big sister, tell me what to do." She couldn't help but feel a headache. "Do you even know who Bayana is?" to dare speak so arrogantly? Last time, I secretly saw Aunt and Nasa come over together with her. Even though no one said it outright, I recognized her at a glance. Those words instead left Bayana somewhat confused. Another person with the same name as herself? Ray solemnly placed his right hand over his chest, his smile full of pure happiness. She's the one Grandpa talked about, the person I must protect with all my might. Bayana's body was weak, yet those words struck her heart like a heavy hammer. So in her grandfather's eyes, she had always been that fragile, easily hurt child, to the point that even someone as young as Ray had to be dragged in to act as a guard. Ray begged again, almost about to kneel. Bayana originally intended to send him off to find Evan, but was interrupted by him. Lord, Evan wouldn't disobey a single word from you. So big sister must have a way, right? Bayana silently sighed. At such a young age, he already understood how to measure a person's ability by power. Even if it's as you say, what right do I have to tell you how to become stronger? Ray was momentarily speechless, clearly having never thought about that question. Trying to move others with just a few empty words, this child was still far too naive. Yet his next words made her instantly change her attitude. Big sister also wants to protect Bayana. You're one of the upper class too, right? You all bear the responsibility of protecting her. Bayana couldn't help but laugh, though inwardly, she silently nodded in agreement. That's right. I must first protect myself before I can protect her. Then what way do you plan to use to become stronger? Ray blurted out, become a noble, because nobles are the strongest. Hearing this, her tone carried a trace of cold mockery. A mixed blood from Yali. And you dare dream of becoming a noble? Ray immediately denied his origins. Bayana looked at his distinctive vertical pupils and mercilessly exposed him. With eyes like those, you still want to keep lying? He lowered his head in shame, covering his eyes tightly with his hands. Under normal circumstances, Bayana would have driven him away with a single sentence. But this time, she unexpectedly developed an interest in the child.
All right.
I can help you walk the path of nobility, but the premise is that you must prove yourself worthy. Have you heard of Rochester Academy? It's the top institution on this continent. Swordsmanship, diplomacy, politics, medicine, almost every field is taught there. As long as you have basic knowledge and can afford the tuition, even commoners can enroll. Watching the excitement slowly light up in Ray's eyes, Bayana immediately poured cold water on him again. The problem is, very few commoners can truly get in. The Academy's so-called basic standards are foundations that young noblemen have trained painstakingly under private tutors since childhood. Even some weaker noble families struggle to afford the fees there, and even if one barely enrolls, they must continuously pass high-difficulty exams to graduate. Fail to graduate within 7 years, and you'll be expelled outright. If you think my conditions are too harsh, it's not too late to turn back now. Ray clenched his fists tightly, his gaze firmer than ever before. As long as I can successfully graduate from the academy, will you let me become a noble? A wager about growth and commitment thus opened its curtain. She, who usually kept a cold expression, finally revealed a rare smile of satisfaction. You must bury your true background deep into your bones, and never let anyone notice. From the moment you step through the school gates, you are merely an ordinary person with no connection whatsoever to high society. Even if one day your identity is exposed, you must never implicate anyone above you, even if it means completely severing ties with the past. Bayana's gaze was sharp, locking onto Ray like fire. Ray's eyes burned with an unyielding light. I will definitely become a noble. Fine, then we'll wager on it as you said. She was filled with curiosity about the Bayana he spoke of, yet in the end decided to wait until everything settled before seeking the answer. At that moment, the door creaked open. The unprepared Ray instantly turned deathly pale. You little brat. Evan had just opened his mouth to scold him when the boy bolted like a startled rabbit. Evan bowed his head in guilt and apologized. I'm sorry, miss. I failed to keep an eye on him. She merely shook her head lightly, signaling that there was no need to say more. Only then did the man hand over an exquisite gift box, the very gift she had previously entrusted him to prepare. As the lid opened, a silver wolf necklace shimmering with flowing light lay quietly on the velvet. She murmured softly, hoping Lant would like it. Closing the box, she rose to leave. He hurriedly spoke up, let me escort you back to the residence, but was politely refused by Bayana on the spot. Do you feel uncomfortable being with me? There was clear unease in his tone. Bayana smiled faintly. Why would you think that? I am your knight. Protecting you is, to me, a mission ordained by heaven. Her heart warmed. She knew well Evan's honesty and rigidity. To fulfill his oath, he always pushed his demands on himself to the extreme, sometimes to the point of self-torment. You don't have to keep yourself so tense all the time. There's no need to be completely bound by grandfather's last words. Grandfather wouldn't want you to live so heavily either. Evan, however, reached out and stood in front of her, his expression more serious than ever. At first, I truly was following the Count's orders. But the first time I met you wasn't on the day he passed away. It was at the Marchioness's funeral. You stood straight back amid everyone's gossip, your eyes stubborn. That scene left a deep impression on me. From that moment on, I knew you were the one I wanted to protect. This is not anyone's commission. It is my own choice. so please allow me to fulfill the vow of my childhood. My master. She had always thought that Evan stayed by her side only because he obeyed her grandfather's orders, never expecting there to be such a past behind it. Since this is a path you personally chose, what reason do I have to refuse? I am very glad to accept your oath, Knight Evan. The two of them walked out of the residence together, where voices, carriages, and horses wove into a bustling stream along the street. There was still an apologetic look on Evan's face. Being unable to prepare a carriage in advance was my failure. She could not help but laugh softly. You almost apologize first every time you see me. The man hurriedly denied it again, flustered in a way that was a little adorable. His clumsy manner amused Bayana, making her smile again and again. She suddenly recalled Anasa once saying that Evan was usually taciturn, calm, and efficient in his work. Yet in front of her, he always lost his composure, unconsciously placing her safety above everything else. When Ray had collided with them that time, Evan had roughly stopped him. Also because he was afraid she would be frightened by Ray's terrifying eyes. The first time she saw Ray in her previous life, those suddenly constricted vertical pupils and blood-red eyeballs had indeed terrified her on the spot. She could not even cry out for help. Her vision went dark, the gift box in her hands fell to the ground, and her whole body swayed, as if about to collapse. At that time, her world revolved only between the Marquis' estate and the Imperial Palace. Her heart and eyes were filled entirely with the Crown Prince. So, how could she have noticed anyone else? She suddenly realized that a piece of her memory seemed to have been forcibly cut away. No matter how she tried to recall it, only blankness remained. Seeing this, Evan's expression changed drastically. Without time to think, he scooped Bayana up in his arms. Pardon my rudeness. I will apologize to you later. Evan seemed nailed to the spot, yet his hands stubbornly refused to loosen, instead holding her even tighter. Please step aside, seeing him standing motionless, guarding her. Sirius suddenly drew his sword, the blade pointing straight at his rival's throat. Put my fiancé down. Seeing the thin line of blood seeping from his neck, Bayana hurriedly spoke to stop it, but Evan still stubbornly held her in his arms. Young A, get down here. A look of abandonment flashed through the big wolf dog's eyes. Yet in the end, he obediently followed his master's command. The Crown Prince could not help but ask first, how exactly am I supposed to understand what's happening before me right now? Evan immediately stepped in front of her again, using his body to shield her. When her gaze fell on his blood-stained shirt, Bayana finally realized that the situation was gradually spiraling out of control. Please put your sword away, Your Highness. Seeing that she was actually defending another man, the anger in Sirius's eyes burned even hotter. Why should I listen to you? Because I am asking you. His brow twitched slightly, and in the end he helplessly sheathed his sword. You really are something. Hiding in another man's arms in front of your fiancé. Shouldn't you give me a reasonable explanation now? Bayana's expression was full of weary impatience. I don't think there's any need for an explanation. Sirius suddenly hoisted her horizontally onto his shoulder and strode away in public. If you don't want to become everyone's after-dinner gossip, left with no choice, Bayana could only sigh inwardly. Why did this kind of trouble always come one after another? After settling her into the back seat of the carriage, Sirius finally asked the question that had been weighing on his heart. Bayana looked at him in confusion. Your Highness has never cared much about his fiancé's reputation, has he? She truly could not think of any other reason. After all, just taking care of the people around her already left her stretched thin. How do you plan to deal with Evan? Sirius instead seized on another point. Your relationship looks quite close. Evan is my man. Are you saying, in front of your fiancé, right before my eyes, that another man is yours? I clearly begged you not to provoke me like this again. His abnormal attitude made Bayana even more puzzled. The Crown Prince in her memory had always been gentle and courteous, never this emotionally out of control. At this moment, however, he looked like an ordinary man drowning in jealousy. If it's not for my reputation, and you don't love me, then what do you have to be angry about? These words left Sirius completely speechless. Even he himself could not figure out what had pushed him to the brink of losing control. Seeing him remain silent, Bayana let out a self-mocking smile. Would you rather say nothing at all than lie? Back then you even wanted me to love you. But I don't want a relationship where I exhaust myself only to be left with pain in the end. I just want to meet someone who loves only me, cherishes me to the end, and grow old peacefully and happily together. And that person will not be you. For the first time in his life, Sirius truly panicked, even afraid of what she might say next. The bond between them might already have reached its end. She did not say another word, and got out of the carriage directly. At this point, even for the sake of his pride, he wouldn't come near me again, would he? She could still endure the faint heartache left behind by the original owner. She looked up at the sky. The evening glow was so intense it seemed ready to swallow people whole, beautiful enough to almost make one forget to breathe. Suddenly, a force from behind wrapped tightly around her. Sirius buried his face into the side of her neck. as if silently begging her to stay. That belated confession from her previous life had been abruptly cut off by a slap from her hand. Yet the man did not get angry. Instead, there was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth as he wiped away the slowly seeping blood from his face. Quite a strong reaction. If I kissed you right now, would you draw your sword and pierce my heart again? It's because of him, right? Did he whisper some sweet words in your ear? The moment Bayanov mentioned Evan, Sirius seemed to go mad all of a sudden. For years and 7 months, you have always kept your distance from me with the etiquette reserved for a prince. Yet when you call his name, it rolls off your tongue so easily. It was like that from the very beginning. Others looked at me with at least some curiosity. Only you wished you could even avoid the air I breathed. But in front of him, you can smile with dimples, an image I can't even beg for in my dreams. You tremble like a little bird in the cold wind whenever you touch me, yet you are willing to curl up like a cat in his arms. What on earth did he do to you? Bayana looked up and met the turmoil of madness and pain in his eyes. This crown prince, always as cold and hard as steel, looked like an abandoned little beast, as if he were truly jealous of Evan. His fingertips brushed her cheek, and she immediately slapped that hand away with force. She saw his hand slowly clench into a fist, the knuckles turning white from the strength. You're always like this. No matter how hard I try, you won't give me even the smallest opening. Do you know that feeling? It really can drive a person insane. I don't understand why your highness insists on being like this. When she confronted his emotions directly, is it because you can't have it, so your pride is wounded? Sirius suddenly let out a low laugh, almost bitter, running a hand irritably through his hair. I have never regarded you as my possession. If I truly thought that way, I wouldn't be this anxious. We've been engaged for almost 5 years, yet in your eyes, I'm still an outsider. He twined her hair around his fingertips, his lashes casting a shadow beneath his eyes, while a near-pleading light hid in his gaze. What exactly must I do to break into the walls you've built? Bayana could not understand it. In her previous life, no matter how humbly she begged, lowering herself into the dust, he never once looked at her directly.
But now?
Why did he suddenly care? Your Highness, why say these things to me? To you, isn't the most important thing still my family background? Sirius did not avoid her gaze. Instead, he gave a soft laugh. At first, that was indeed the case. I only needed you not to block my path. Just like never realizing that a fine drizzle will slowly soak one's clothes. By the time I noticed, his voice gradually lowered, but in the next instant it tightened abruptly. I began counting the days until I could see you. I smiled unconsciously when I was with you, and I longed for your eyes to hold only me. But the thought of you lying in someone else's arms makes me want to tear that man to pieces. Just imagining you falling in love with someone else is enough to drive me insane. If this is love, then I'm probably already terminally ill. This was the confession she had once begged for in her previous life. Yet Bayana trembled slightly. Could she trust him? If this were only a momentary impulse, then what could possibly guarantee that he wouldn't change his heart the instant he met that woman? Her voice was as cold as ice. This cannot be love. Sirius suddenly grabbed her wrist. Why do you have to be so certain? Between us, when has there ever been trust? She forcefully pulled her hand back. What does your highness want to hear? To hear me say through tears that I actually love you? Don't be naive. Between us, there is only a contract, no feelings. The air froze instantly. Sirius's breath caught, and then he tugged at the corner of his mouth in self-mockery. You and your father are exactly alike. Bayana sensed something beneath the words. Could there be some secret agreement between the crown prince and her father? But in the next second, Sirius had already gripped her shoulders, a near-obsessive persistence flashing in his eyes. Those damned contracts don't matter anymore. I like you. Stop pushing me away. What Bayana truly feared had never been falling in love with him itself, but rather within the whirlpool of emotions, slowly losing herself, becoming lost in that scorching, mad possessiveness. At this moment, she still did not have a real answer, but did she really want to hide in the shadow of fear for a lifetime? If every pounding heartbeat when she met him was enough to shake her resolve, could that be love in some sense? Then perhaps she should unravel this mystery with her own hands. Act spoiled toward me like a child. Use the way you're best at to seduce me. Press all your blazing passion onto me until my heart is willing to stop for you. As expected, 2 years later, Eileen appeared, putting aside her own rather unlikable aura. The heavy sins Bayana had committed against her in the previous life alone already made her too ashamed to face her. In the end, Eileen was no different from her former self, simply someone who deeply loved the crown prince. Wanting to stay by the side of the one you love is, after all, an entirely ordinary wish. Imperial law allowed polygamy and even all but tacitly approved of consanguineous marriages, so people naturally accepted the union of the crown prince and Eileen, who were cousins. But that did not mean Bayana could accept it willingly. After the emperor, the only one who could stand up for her, passed away, Eileen moved into the imperial palace as a matter of course. From that day on, Bayana's nightmare began. Using the Empress's authority, she withheld funds for the renovation of Eileen's palace and even went in person to provoke her. Humiliating a girl who knew nothing of court etiquette, had no bearing befitting a duke's daughter, and could only silently shed tears in the face of harassment. It was simply too easy. And the crown prince never truly stopped her. At most, he would occasionally cast an unhappy glance, or simply pretend not to see it. Afterwards, he would turn around and gently wipe Eileen's tears, patiently comforting her. He could have warned that version of herself, who tormented his lover again and again, but under his tacit consent and indulgence, jealousy completely devoured Bayana's reason, and she made that incredibly foolish choice to poison her. Although Eileen survived by sheer luck, she was forced to lose her freedom and was imprisoned for life. Looking back now, how impulsive she had been back then, she had never even thought that what she did to Eileen was wrong, much less welcomed Eileen's return to the imperial capital. Evan was still investigating the relevant information. Before that, she could only wait and see. The crown prince also did not pursue Evan's offense in the street. Yes, just as she had completely become a different person, the crown prince was no longer the same as before either. Grandfather, Anasa, the marquis, everything was completely different from the past. There was a gentle knock on the door, and Lant poked his head in with an expectant look. Sister. Bayana rubbed his hair, still damp with moisture, her tone lightly reproachful. You're getting more and more careless. She took the towel from him, and Lant asked softly, Sister, do you maybe dislike me a little? Bayana smiled and said, remember to dry your hair next time. What if you catch a cold? Lant muttered aggrievedly. I just wanted to see Sister sooner. I heard your training with Master has improved a lot. A trace of satisfaction flashed through Bayana's eyes. Not bad. She then pointed to the exquisite wooden box on the table. The gift I prepared for you is right there. Lant did as told, opening the box and carefully taking out the item inside. It was a smoothly polished seal. I made this myself. The flower language of the clover is happiness, and I hope you'll always be happy, my little puppy. The boy's reaction, however, was not as joyful as she had imagined. He merely gazed silently at the seal, then nodded lightly. Seeing this, Bayana raised her finger and gently lifted his chin, forcing him to look up at her. Her tone deliberately tinged with teasing. It seems you don't like it very much? A gift your sister prepared with such care, and not even a thank you. How heartbreaking. Good little puppy. That half-teasing, half-indulgent good little puppy struck Lance straight in the heart like an arrow, and his eyes instantly reddened. He suddenly threw himself into Bayana's arms, his fluffy head rubbing lightly against her chest, his voice choked. Thank you, sister. I really, really like it. Bayana gently wrapped her arms around him. I chose this with care. Until you receive the official family seal that symbolizes your status, you must keep wearing this. The body in her arms stiffened noticeably, and Lance's face was filled with hesitation. With his less than legitimate birth and delicate position, the path to becoming head of the family was fraught with thorns. But Bayana's next words swept away all the gloom in his heart like a warm current. If you don't want to be the family head, that's completely fine too. I'm not teaching you these things to turn you into another marquis, nor am I trying to trap you in a greenhouse. I just hope that when you truly find the path you want to walk someday, you'll have a few more options in your pack. Be bold and do what you want to do. No matter which road you choose, your sister will always be your strongest support. As for other people's gossip, you only need to remember one thing. You are my, Bayana's, only little brother. That is enough. Those troublesome matters that needed dealing with finally seemed to come to an end one by one. Bayana quietly let out a sigh of relief in her heart, thinking that she could finally enjoy some peaceful days, go nowhere, and just stay at home. But that thought was quickly shattered. The crown prince had actually come in person and was now standing openly at the entrance of the estate. Seeing Bayana's indifferent expression and distant attitude, Sirius not only didn't retreat but pressed forward even more aggressively. There's no need for that kind of formulaic small talk between us. As soon as she spoke, her tone was like discussing official business. Sirius deliberately put on a wounded expression, talking about serious matters the moment we meet. Don't you think that's too heartless? Bayana was puzzled. Yesterday, he had been furious. So why did he seem like a different person today? It seemed that saying, the one who loves more is destined to lose, was absolutely true. If I say, Sirius stared straight at her. Bayana could only think that this man must be crazy. The butler at the side could only avert his eyes and clear his mind, silently lowering his head to eat dog food, doing his best to minimize his own presence. Only when the young lady gave a signal did he hurry out of the room, as if granted a pardon. With only the two of them left in the room, the crown prince patted the empty seat beside him on the sofa. Don't just stand there. His tone was as natural as if they had been close for years. I really did come, because I missed you too much. The moment I opened my eyes this morning, my mind was full of you. All in all, I seem to have completely fallen for you. He suddenly pointed at his own cheek. To deal with the people asking about the origin of my wound, I racked my brains before I finally managed to fool them. Bayana looked annoyed. I didn't expect your highness's skin to be even more delicate than I imagined. Sirius accepted it calmly. After all, your methods were fiercer than I thought. Baiana replied readily, of course, they always have been. He let out a low laugh. It seems I'll have to be extra careful in the future. You sometimes hit vital points with frightening accuracy in the most unexpected places. His gaze gradually grew meaningful. Do you think I need to go that far? Of course you do. Sirius suddenly leaned forward, his eyes burning. The one who wanted to seduce you at the start was clearly me, not you. Yet now, the one who's utterly bewitched is me. Baiana's heart jolted violently, and she snapped back to her senses, quickly averting her gaze. Is your highness trying to seduce me? This level of temptation is far from enough. Practice a few more times and come back. I'm quite experienced when it comes to honey traps. Not only was Sirius not angry, he laughed even more unrestrainedly. Hearing you say that at least means you quite approve of this face of mine. Compared to what you said before about my slick old fox tone, I'll take that as praise. Did your highness come all this way just to say such irrelevant things? Sirius made no attempt to hide it. Just like you said, I did come to make you like me. Whether it's seduction or shameless persistence, I have to make you willing to look at me properly first before I can do anything, right? It seems your highness has been quite idle lately. I don't have that much time to chat with you here. What flashed through Sirius's eyes was genuine hurt. Did I do something wrong? Baiana was silent for a moment before speaking seriously. I don't dislike your highness. In her previous life, he had not looked down on her, nor did he understand how lovers should truly get along. He only stubbornly craved love, like a child. Even so, the crown prince had still given her the respect and dignity befitting a future queen. It was simply that she did not love him. She did not resent him, yet she still frankly admitted that she had once detested him. To be honest, I have no idea how to face the current you. I just feel awkward and uncomfortable. After hearing this, Sirius's eyes seemed to light up instantly, and he let out a laugh without realizing it. At least, this isn't the worst answer. That alone is already enough to make me feel fortunate. 10 days later, the annual Royal Hunting Assembly was about to begin, one of the major events held by the royal family every year. Rather than a hunt, it was closer to a lavish stage for aristocratic socializing. Not only male nobles, but also unmarried young ladies would appear in splendid attire. Starting this year, Baiana would officially participate as the crown prince's fiancée. After Anassa finished checking the list of preparations, she was about to take her leave when Baiana called out to her, "Drink this cup of tea first." Anassa obediently lifted the teacup and took a small sip. The unique floral fragrance instantly conquered her taste buds. This tea is made from leisha flowers. Anassa was so startled that she almost dropped the cup. Aren't those the flowers symbolizing the crown princess? How could you use such precious flowers to make tea? Baiana looked somewhat helpless. It was bestowed by His Majesty, and in quite a generous amount. I've already received His Majesty's approval. Drink it without worry. Only then did Anassa truly relax. Before the young lady has even formally married out, she's already won His Majesty's favor, and the crown prince also visits the Marquis's residence every now and then. Baiana coughed lightly twice and swiftly changed the subject. I heard something big seems to have happened in the West recently. Evan has already gone there in person, and a trace of unease quietly spread in her heart. At this moment, Anassa lowered her voice and asked, "Is the crown prince really as jealous as the rumors say? Gentle as you are, to drive him to make such a scene in the street." Thanks to that street incident, all kinds of rumors had spread throughout the city, with many people maliciously speculating that she had an improper relationship with the former trade guild master, Evan. In the end, it was the crown prince himself who came forward to clarify, saying it was merely a small misunderstanding caused by his jealousy. He emphasized how close his relationship with Baiana was, saying that every meeting involved long conversations. Although it sounded unbearably annoying, Baiana also realized that she didn't entirely dislike this situation. No one could say what the future would bring, so she might as well enjoy the present first. What other tricks would this prince use to seduce her? She found that she, too, had quietly developed a faint, subtle sense of anticipation.